Welcome back to The Explainer. Sometimes a real-life story reads literally exactly like the panels of a classic comic book. And today, we're diving straight into one. We're going to map the incredible real-life rise of English actor Tom Holland right on to the epic hero's journey of the character that made him a global superstar, Peter Parker. It is such a fascinating parallel, right? An unassuming kid taking on this massive world-saving responsibility and totally redefining a legacy.
And to kick things off, just look at this massive endorsement. The legendary Stan Lee, the guy who literally co-created Spider-Man, famously said, "It's as if we created a living being to be Spider-Man, and it turned out to be Tom." I mean, wow. He even noted that Holland was the exact age and height he envisioned when he first dreamed up the character decades ago. So we're using this quote as the anchor for our explainer today. We're going to break down exactly what makes Tom Holland the definitive live-action Spider-Man for a whole new generation.
All right, let's jump into Chapter 1, the origin story. It's honestly fascinating to look back at how rapidly his pre-Marvel trajectory moved, because before he ever snapped on the web shooters, he was already building this intense physical and emotional toolkit. Back in 2008, he debuted on the West End in Billy Elliot the Musical. That gave him some hardcore training in ballet, tap, and gymnastics. Then, cut to 2012, he makes his film debut in The Impossible, where he literally survived filming inside a grueling 35,000-gallon water tank alongside Naomi Watts. And all of that intense foundational work, it paid off big time, culminating in 2015 when he officially inked that massive six-picture deal with Marvel Studios. But look, it wasn't just a straight, easy shot to the top. Just like Peter Parker, Tom had a share of early struggles. At age 7, he was diagnosed with dyslexia. His parents actually ended up shifting him over to a private school just to make sure he got the one-on-one attention he needed. And while that decision really drained his family's finances at the time, it forged this deep, deep resilience in him. He learned super early on how to navigate roadblocks and adapt. And those are skills that would prove absolutely crucial once he hit Hollywood. Now, let's talk numbers for a second. 1,500. That is the staggering number of teenagers around the globe that Holland had to beat out through these intensely grueling auditions just to land the coveted role of the web-slinger. He wasn't just handed the suit on a silver platter, right? He fought tooth and nail for it against a massive pool of global talent. Moving right along to Chapter 2, casting the perfect Peter. To really understand why his casting works so well, let's look at an interesting perspective from an opinion piece in The Comedian. Now, look, fans are always going to debate who the ultimate live-action Spider-Man is. That's a given. But The Comedian makes this really compelling demographic argument based purely on physicality. They point out that Holland was cast at just 19 years old, which brought this incredibly authentic, awkward teen vibe, plus that real gymnastics background we talked about. In contrast, they note that predecessors like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were cast in their late 20s, so they brought a much more mature energy and a comedic timing that fans definitely still debate to this day. So, breaking down the actual anatomy of Holland's specific performance, the source really highlights his authentic teenager charm. Like, he actually looked and felt like a kid in high school. And because of that dance and gymnastics background from his Billy Elliot days, he could perform a ton of his own stunts. That brought this dynamic, realistic agility to the screen that, honestly, CGI alone just cannot capture. The article also praises his quick wit, noting he successfully dodged those cringe superhero one-liners, and it applauds his really vivid, highly emotional depictions of grief and maturity as the character grows. Which brings us to Chapter 3, the definitive web-slinger. One of the defining features of Holland's era of Spider-Man is his dynamic with Tony Stark. According to an interview highlighted by Geeks of Color, Holland noted a really specific vibe working with Robert Downey Jr. He said Robert is more like a big brother than he is a father figure because he picks on him and he is down on him quite a lot. It wasn't just your standard, boring mentor-mentee relationship. It was teasing, it felt grounded, and it brought out a completely different side of the billionaire playboy character, all while perfectly anchoring Peter in that wider Marvel universe. And even outside of the whole Avenger spectacle, his solo films masterfully capture that frantic, totally relatable balancing act of just being a kid. The combing piece highlights how refreshing it was to watch this absolute genius kid get rejected from his dream colleges, while simultaneously trying to keep up with his high school homework and, secretly saving queens from supervillains on the side. It really grounded all that massive superhero spectacle in very real, very human teenage anxieties. Next up, Chapter 4, With Great Power. This is where Holland's real-life actions started to directly mirror his on-screen heroism. Remember when the corporate deal between Disney and Sony briefly collapsed back in 2019, threatening to literally pull Spider-Man out of the MCU?
Well, it was Holland who personally picked up the phone and reached out to Disney's then CEO, Bob Iger, to help reconnect the studios. On top of that massive corporate maneuvering, he started taking real creative ownership on set. And maybe most importantly, he had to learn how to set strict personal boundaries to protect his own well-being against the crushing pressure of global fame.
Speaking of that creative ownership, check out this amazing anecdote from Nerdist. During the filming of the massive, highly anticipated climax for Spider-Man No Way Home, Holland actually hit the brakes and halted production. He recalled, "I kept stopping and being like, I'm so sorry, I just don't believe what I'm saying." He just felt the scene was wrong for Peter Parker. So he sat down with director John Watts, pitched a brand new idea, had the writers rework the ending, and completely altered the ultimate fate of his character to make it feel authentic. I mean, doing that on a billion-dollar set takes serious courage. But learning to wield that kind of power, it required a huge shift in mindset. Holland has openly admitted to being a massive people pleaser, which eventually led him to severe burnout. Luckily, he picked up a powerful piece of advice from his Marvel co-star Elizabeth Olsen. She simply told him, "No" is a full sentence. Honestly, what a fantastic takeaway for all of us. He learned that he didn't need to constantly over-explain or completely exhaust himself trying to make everyone else happy. Just setting a boundary was enough.
And that leads us into Chapter 5, Beyond the Mask.
So here is the pivotal question, right? What exactly happens when Peter Parker grows up? We've watched him navigate these chaotic teenage superhero years, but what does his life look like as he transitions into a surprisingly mature, real-world leading man? Well, the source material reveals a beautifully grounded evolution. He has heavily prioritized his private life, highlighted, of course, by his relationship with his co-star Zendaya. Professionally, he's recognized his own limits, actually taking a full year off acting after dealing with the sheer emotional exhaustion of filming the intense miniseries The Crowded Room. Plus, he's embraced sobriety, launching his very own non-alcoholic beer brand called BERO in 2024. And on top of all that, he continues to beautifully advocate for neurodivergence, publicly embracing and talking about both his ADHD and his dyslexia. He is literally prioritizing his mental health over the relentless Hollywood grind. But don't worry, he is far from done with the big screen. If anything, he's leveling up. Up next, he's starring in legendary director Christopher Nolan's highly anticipated next film, a gig Holland called the job of a lifetime. And yes, for sure, he's keeping those web shooters ready, with the fourth installment of his Spider-Man franchise officially on the horizon. So, I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder today. As he balances elite auteur cinema with these massive blockbuster franchises, all while so openly championing mental health and personal boundaries, how will Tom Holland continue to completely redefine what it means to be a Hollywood leading man for a whole new generation? It really is a real-life hero's journey, and it's thrilling to watch unfold. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.